We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked.
And complete the dang fence.
This bill that we will sign today is not a revolutionary bill.
Cast down your bucket where you are.
We come from France.
And I am, adamantly against illegal immigrants.
They're coming in by the thousands, just unbelievable.
The wall is an immorality.
Who are you rooting for?
Those masters of the universe are at it again.
You maniac! You blew it up!
Welcome to Parsing Immigration Policy, the podcast of the Center for Immigration Studies. My name is Mark Krikorian, Executive Director of the Center. And today we have in studio a special guest, Balazs Orban, who's a member of the Hungarian Parliament and the political director for Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, but no relation. It's just a coincidence. It's not like he's hiring his son or anything. But Balazs has been involved in the immigration issue even before he entered politics, and I want to talk about some of what Hungary is dealing with regard to immigration, because there's news in that regard. But Balazs, thanks for coming in. And if you could first maybe tell us just briefly how you got into the immigration issue, and you had encountered CIS before, actually. So what's the backstory there?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here. Well, the first time I saw this institution was, I think, around 2015 and 16. There was a big, back at the time, there was, and there is still a big immigration crisis in Europe. But
Right.
That was the first time when, like 400,000 people wanted to march across the European continent. And it was a big case back there.
Invited by Angela Merkel.
Exactly.
Right.
And the Hungarian government was the only one which was saying that it's insane what is happening there, so we should not welcome them, but we should restore law and order and protect our borders. So we made the decision to establish a fence and serious and effective border measures, and it actually worked very well. But at the beginning, the domestic and the international heat of the debate was very high.
Even within Hungary.
And we realized that if we were looking for experts and think tank people, that, we need somebody who is capable of explaining that, not open border policy is the only idea which exists, but there are certain ways how to secure border, maintain identity, and still fulfilling your humanitarian requirements some other ways. Then we realized that there is nobody in Hungary because all the experts were linked to liberal international open door policy circles.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we established a new think tank, a single issue think tank. It's called Migration Research Institute. And I became the first managing director of this institute. And then I realized I was looking for partners, and I found your institution, and I realized that this is actually very good, very high level research, very professional, very normal in many sense, and that you were dealing with this problem for many, many years. So actually, I learned a lot from your institutions, and now there is a partnership between two institutions.
And several, in fact. We have that International Network for Immigration Research, which the MRI in Budapest is part of, as well as partner groups in Paris and Jerusalem.
Indeed. And the public perception also changing.
Right.
Hungarian
Absolutely.
public perception is 100% in favor of securing borders. Law and order, American is the same.
That's kind of one of the things I wanted to ask about, because a new development, what you were talking about, was the 2015-16 issue, and you put up a fence in Hungary on the Serbian border to get people to go somewhere else and not through Hungary, that sort of thing. But more recently, the European Court of Justice has fined Hungary hundreds of millions of euros for, I guess, not going along with the open door immigration policies. And I'm wondering if you could tell us sort of what happened, what is it Hungary's not doing that they got fined for?
So we're in a very special position because we have a very committed anti-illegal migration government. We even organized a referendum in 2016. We asked the Hungarian people whether they want mass immigration or not. And the overwhelming majority of the Hungarians voted against illegal migration and voted in favor of, like securing our borders. And so at home, I would say the nation is united and the government knows what its duty is. But we are a member of European Union. And from a legal point of view, we had kind of a shared sovereignty on that policy field with the European Union. So there are some legal issues where we have to be adaptive to European law, and there are some issues which we can regulate on our own. And the problem is that in Brussels, it's still a very open and very pro-migration narrative, and the liberal forces there are dominating the entire discourse. And despite the fact that since 2015-16, many more Europeans, hundreds of millions of Europeans realized that, this open door policy leads us nowhere. It's only weakening Europe. The liberal elites and the institutions still trying to put pressure on those governments who are protecting the borders. And this is what happened. We created the system, which was first based on the idea of transit zones. So if you arrive to the Hungarian border, you can apply for asylum there, but you have to wait in a transit zone, which is closed.
Instead of being let go into the
Instead
country.
of being let go. So you only have the right to enter the country when your asylum application is accepted.
Right.
Before that, it's not possible. And according to Strasbourg, this is against humanitarian law or against the European law. So we then said, okay, then we closed the transit zones.
Right.
And we were saying that your only chance to apply for asylum is through the embassies in Belgrade, so in neighboring countries.
Right.
You have to go there and apply for asylum there. And if you get the green light, you can enter. But if you try to make it illegally, we are in a very polite way, but escort you back
to the border, push them back into Serbia
border.
or wherever.
Yes, because you don't have to be anti-human, you have to respect each and every individual right, but you have to prove that you are not going to make it. If you try it illegally, you are losing something, not getting something. This was actually this idea was coming from the Australians. When under Tony Abbott, they introduced this zero tolerance.
Stop the boats.
Stop the boats.
Right, yeah.
And the idea is that you can get to Australia if you are legally applying from outside. But if you're trying to make it through the boats, we will bring you to Nauru, middle of nowhere, and you lose your chance. This is a very similar method, but we are a landlocked country. So we put together this system. It's like a physical fence and legal fence. And we are under heavy attack by Brussels. And it's fine what you were mentioning. It's really a huge amount of money. It's comparable to our GDP.
Wow.
It depends on how we count it, but it's a comparable amount of money with the Hungarian GDP. It's insane.
And then an additional €1 million a day. That you
1
don't
million
comply.
euro a day.
Right.
It's $1 million.
And so this isn't, you don't have to pay it. It just comes out of whatever subsidies might be coming from Europe. Is that what it is?
If you're not paying it, then we don't get the subsidies. So I think it's insane. And the problem is that there is no alternative. Everybody knows that if you want to stop migration, first, you have to deal with the transit countries and the countries of origins. And second, you have to be able to prevent illegal border crossings. These are the two priorities. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's just, this is how you do it.
Unfortunately for our administration, it is rocket science. They can't figure it out.
But most probably the problem is with the willingness, whether they want it or not. So, but if you want to do it, or you want to stop illegal immigration, this is how you do it. It's international know-how. And actually, the European law makes it impossible and makes the life miserable for those countries who are ready to do so. So Europe, we have serious problems. Obviously, Hungary will not give up. It cannot happen that we let illegal immigrants to enter our country because it would immediately undermine, public safety and security.
Wasn't something else the EU was trying to insist on was that Hungary and every other country in the EU take a share of illegal immigrants who had come into other countries, like say, they'd come across in boat to Spain or Italy, and that every country, maybe depending on its population, would have to take a certain number of those illegal immigrants.
Yes, this is another crazy idea, the so-called quota system or relocation system. It's an obligatory system, what they really introducing. And the idea behind it is not stopping people outside the territory of Europe, but letting them in and then relocate them, whether the countries want or not. Imagine the situation that somebody enters in Spain and they are, paid by European taxpayers, relocated to Estonia or Hungary. It's like, and then the entire procedure going on there, and then something happens. But in the meantime, there is Schengen zone. So internally, there is no border control, so they can go and they can leave anytime and go wherever they want. So it's an insane logic. And the other idea is that they try to force us and everybody that if there is another influx of people, then the European Union can persuade you or can put pressure on you to establish new camps, open camps, refugee camps.
In your country.
In your country.
Wow.
So they want to tell you how big capacities you have to install in your country. So it's really a very bad logic. But, and Hungary is facing challenges from two directions because we have this illegal migration, mainly from Africa, Middle East, and Central Asia, coming from the Balkans. It's our southern borders. Right. But we also have war in our neighborhood, the Russian-Ukrainian war. So in the meantime, we try to secure our borders, but those who are fleeing from the conflict, which is in our neighborhood, we let them in because that's a different story. So I think nobody has to go across entire continents and start a new life and then say that, it's my fundamental law to start a new life somewhere else. It's
to pass through 10 or 12 different countries and then say they have a right.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
But if you have a conflict in your neighborhood country, or a war, actually, that's a different story. So we try to keep our southern borders, and in the meantime, we try to deal with the refugees. So it's a double pressure.
Interesting.
And we get this financial burdens from the West, from Brussels. So it's not easy to be Hungarian. Nowadays.
So this is a question that I've always sort of wondered about because, for instance, during the migration crisis in 2015, and this would still be the case in most places, the illegal immigrants coming through Hungary or really through Italy or Spain or anywhere else, they really want to end up in Germany or Sweden. So why not, and this is, devil's advocate, but why not just make sure they leave? In other words, instead of stopping them, just say, look, you can't stay and we're going to chase you and follow you, but as long as you leave, we won't stop you.
Actually, this is during those debates, my prime minister told Angela Merkel back at that time that if you need them, I can collect them and create a corridor and send them directly to Berlin. I will pay for it.
Right.
But then surprise, surprise, she rejected it.
Right.
And the problem is that according to European law, you have to register them. And if they leave, they can send them back. So then the burden is on you. This is why we did choose a path where you fulfill your obligations to provide opportunity for them to apply for asylum, but also in the meantime, securing Schengen and protecting the borders.
So Italy is also in the EU, and they've arranged an agreement with Albania that I call Remain in Albania, to be kind of like our Remain in Mexico, where if people come across on a boat, they get sent back to Albania, they can apply there. They can still get asylum in the EU, but they have to apply there. Is there any possibility, have you all thought about, I don't know, Remain in Bulgaria or something, where if people, I think they're in the EU now. But I mean, in other words, a similar thing, a kind of offshore, you were mentioning it applying in embassies, but I'm talking about actually removing people to another country.
Outside hotspots. This is the European terminology. Well, Italy is suffering from migration pretty much. They tried to do something. They were very good in making deals with some of the transit countries, mainly in North Africa. And, I don't want to underestimate the importance of that, because previously I was in many places. I visited all these conflict regions. I was in Libya, in Iraq, in Bangladesh, and so on, Nigeria, and so on and so on. So I know how it goes. And when I was in Libya, they got mixed signals. They were in the middle of civil war, and then some European countries wanted to convince them to stop the boats, but the European Union itself and the Foreign Service, obviously very liberal type of people, were on a daily basis accusing them of violating humanitarian law. Meanwhile, they were in civil war, so there were ongoing fights. It was really insane.
Right.
So Europe, sometimes the Brussels institutions, they don't act in accordance with Europe's interest.
Right, right.
And so I think Italy played a very important role in changing this course and try to make an agreement with the transit countries, but it's obviously not enough. And their problem is that those who are inside Italy, they want to, find another place for them. And this is why the
migrants inside.
Yeah.
Right.
They invented this hotspot idea in Albania. We will see whether it works or not. In general, we support the idea of outside hotspots, but it's also very controversial because it's a very colonial type of thinking that you go to a poorer country and then you tell them that you get money but take our illegal migrants. So it's like, it's not so easy. So this is why we try to tell everyone that okay, probably it's cheaper and more effective than we just maintain border control. Don't let them in.
Right.
And the entire hotspot structures and the places where you can apply for an asylum should be far from your borders, not on your borders, but somewhere else. And it's like the Rwanda model, which was introduced
I was going to ask about Rwanda.
By the Tories. It costs a lot of money because you have to manage the transfer.
And then pay for their upkeep to some degree.
Pay for the upkeeper. So I don't know whether it's the most effective way or not. Probably not.
Interesting. And just one last issue on this. In a sense, Serbia is sort of like Mexico for us, for you. In other words, that's the country that people are trying to get in. What are Hungary's relationships with Serbia and specifically on this issue of controlling illegal immigration?
We have very good relations, political relations with them. We work together and we try to convince them always that it's also their interest to cooperate and to secure the borders. There was a period of time when they were saying that, we don't do anything. They don't want to stay here.
Right. Like Mexico, just keep going, get out of our country.
Human smugglers, they can earn money and so on and so on. But luckily, it seems that they changed their policy and they realized that it's really undermining public safety in their country as well, because there's gang violence and it's like it's not the proper situation when you have thousands and thousands or 10,000s of people living on the streets in your small country. We're talking about a country with less than 10 million people, so it's smaller than Hungary. So they changed their policy. Now they are defending the borders, and we try to work together with the other countries, small countries on the Balkans, to do the same. But they need help. And the European Union would be a very good actor, an important actor, if people in Brussels would be able to say that, look, guys, if you want to get closer to European Union, then your job is to secure borders. But the opposite things is happening.
Really?
It's like they are accused of being, anti-European, too harsh. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So this is a problem that policy recommendations which are coming from Brussels is pointing to a completely different direction.
So starting at the beginning of this month, for 6 months, Hungary is chairman or president or whatever of the Council of the European Union. I guess it's a rotating position. Does that mean anything? Does that give Hungary any extra leverage or something in the immigration issue? What does that mean?
Well, you don't have to under and overestimate this position. You are chairing the council meetings, and based on this, you have some influence about agenda setting. But obviously, it's not that you are deciding things.
Right.
You have to be this is how they call it, an honest broker. So bring all 27 member states together. But actually, we put together a strategy for the presidency, list of priorities. And one of our priority is to focus on preventing illegal migration. But it's very complicated because the European countries are divided. Like there are some countries who are already dealing with the problem. The migrants are there, second, third generation people. Sometimes they are citizens, like millions, former immigrants are citizens. And they have integration problems. And they think that they need new kind of immigration, but they don't know how to manage it. And in the meantime, there are some other countries like Hungary where we see the path which was taken before by other Western European countries, and no one can convince us that the advantages of following that path are bigger than the disadvantages, because we see that, terrorism, parallel societies, and so on. So we don't want to follow that path. So we want to close our borders. So our policy priority is securing the borders, and their policy priority is managing the integration.
Right.
So it's a completely different mindset. And to bring this together, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's almost impossible. So what we try to do is now explaining them that we will never agree on this integration story, because you want to integrate them. It's your job. It's your duty. I understand it's a challenge for you, but we don't have this kind of challenge.
And we want to avoid having that challenge.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So, but there is one common interest. The common interest is to restore control, regain control over our borders, because if you need more immigrants, you also want to have control over it. So then why don't we focus on our joint efforts on preventing illegal migration, and the rest can be done by the individual member states. At that field, we don't have to have common European policy.
So they can have different policies based on their interests if there's control. Yeah. So you were talking here, basically France, UK, Germany, they already have large immigrant populations. They're having to deal with integration, and maybe that has something to do with the political changes there, big increases in the anti-immigration vote, even if the left won in both of those countries. But in a sense, Hungary is similar to, say, Poland, the Czech Republic, et cetera, in that they didn't have and don't have a big immigrant population. So they're not dealing so much with the integration issue. But why is Hungary different? Why is Hungary's approach different from, say, Poland or the Czech Republic when it comes to immigration?
Well, but things are changing very rapidly now in the Czech Republic and in Poland. There is an integration issue, not because of the African or Asian migrants, but because of the Ukrainians. Millions and millions of Ukrainians are living there. And on the one hand, it's good for them because it's labor. And, they're all also Christians, Orthodox Christians. They know the language because the Ukrainian language is very similar to the Polish or the Czechish language. So it's easy to learn. After a couple of months, you can make it. But the numbers are very high and the social tension is there, distribution questions. So they are stuck in that problem. In Hungary, the Ukrainian refugee population is not so big because we are letting them in, but their culture is very different for them. The language is very difficult.
Yeah.
And they prefer other Slavic countries. So I think this is the biggest difference. Then in Hungary, we made the decision that obviously mobility is inevitable, but we don't want an immigration-based society. We have some guest workers, but it's a very limited number, and we want to keep it that way. And in the long term, we try to manage our demographic challenges by increasing the fertility rate. So it's a family-friendly policy that helping the young Hungarians who are willing to have more children to have these children the state should involved in a very active way on helping these young couples
with subsidies for housing,
special loans, and So it's like very, very hard to compare it with the American system because it's different, but active engagement on the state side on pro-family policies, like increased marriage rates and so on. And we were very successful on that because number of marriages went up, number of divorces went down, number of abortions without changing any kind of regulation went down.
Okay.
So it works, but it's not enough. So
Right.
we need 2.1 fertility rate, and now it's lower. So we need to increase our...
So isn't one of the things that Hungary does also, don't you have diaspora migration? In other words, Hungarians from overseas, from Romania and Slovakia and elsewhere, or is that not a major flow of people?
Well, there is a kind of a flow, but we don't prefer it because, many of them are Hungarian citizens because our idea is like, we have a very similar citizenship model than for Israel.
I see.
So you can have Israeli passport, and in the meantime, you can have dual citizens and living other parts of the world because, this is history of our country that our people are living in various places and in various different countries. So everybody has Hungarian citizenship, though they can come and go freely. But we have Hungarian diaspora outside the current territory of Hungary, in Romania, Slovakia, Ukraine, Serbia. And those people are living there for like 900 years. Right. So it's like, and we think that culture and the idea of homeland is important. So we try to help them to stay there.
I see.
And try to make a living, try to make a family there. Don't move, don't leave.
Interesting.
Don't give up your heritage.
Right,
This is the basic idea. We have some immigration population coming from Serbia and Ukraine. Probably these are the most popular countries of origins. But as I mentioned to you, it's like we have a very strict guestwork regulation system. It's more close to the Qataris regulation than to another European regulation.
Interesting.
And we want to keep it that way.
Right.
And if we need labor, then employment rate, when we came back to power in 2010, it was 55% now, which was among the lowest in Europe. And now the employment rate is around 78%.
Wow.
Which
of
is
Hungarians. In other words, the share of people working.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's one of the highest. It's not the highest because the highest is around 85, 82, 85, Germany, Netherlands, the Dutch. And so we still think that we have some golden reserves. So there is still a room for improvement. You just have to have wise governmental policies. You have to identify which are the regions where the employment rate is not as high as it should be and bring education there and convince the foreign direct investors to go there, not to those places where probably it's much comfortable for you, but you will not find any skilled labor. So you will want to bring in immigrants, but it's not going to happen because we will not let you do so. So let's choose another part of the country where you have people. But it requires a very active government involvement. Without that, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, because without that, if immigration is flowing in, it becomes the easiest solution kind
of.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, I know you have to run. Thanks for spending this time with us. It's Balazs Orban, who's a member of the Hungarian Parliament and the political director for Prime Minister Orban. No relation. I just want to make clear because everybody assumes there is.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thanks for coming in, and we'll maybe if we get back into the U.S., we'll have you back.
Thank you. I will.
And finally, on a slightly different matter, closer to home, I was watching part of the Republican convention recently, and it was the night devoted to security issues. And Senator Cruz gave a speech highlighting the vulnerabilities caused by open borders, specifically relating to various people who have been killed, including Rachel Morin, the woman in Maryland who was raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant that the Biden administration had released into the United States. Her brother also spoke at the convention, and this brought to mind something that we actually addressed in a blog post by Todd Bensman this week as well. And that is that the whole issue that the loose enforcement side, to put it charitably, the way they've approached the issue of illegal immigrant crime is to say that the crime rate of illegal immigrants is lower than the crime rate of the native born. Now, this itself is a contested question. We've weighed in a little bit on it, but Todd's blog post really says pretty clearly what many of us have said all along, which is that it's not really a legitimate comparison. Illegal immigrants shouldn't be here. They are subject to the whole structure of deportation and detention and all the rest of it. And so comparing the rate of crime committed by illegal immigrants is simply an illegitimate comparison. It's a sham issue. And the fact is that every crime committed by an illegal immigrant is an extra crime on top of the crimes that we already have here. Now, we have fellow citizens who are criminals, and that's the way it is. It's going to be that way in any society, and we have to deal with it. Illegal immigrants should not be here in the first place, and every crime they commit, the high-profile ones that were featured at the convention that Senator Cruz and various surviving family members talked about, but also the less notable, less high-profile ones, and there are thousands of them, of course, not because illegal immigrants are somehow uniquely criminal. That's what the anti-enforcement people want you to think when you hear about complaints about illegal immigrant crime, but rather because there's just lots of illegal immigrants, because most recently this administration's conscious policy to let in lots of illegal immigrants, and many of those people, regardless of what the crime rate is, many of those people are going to commit crimes. Every single one of those crimes is preventable, should not happen, and is the result of failure of government policy. And so the issue needs to be, how do we reduce the number of crimes committed by illegal immigrants, namely by keeping them from getting to the United States and removing them expeditiously if they're already here, not some arcane question of what is the rate of criminality among illegal immigrants, which is an irrelevant question to the victims of crimes committed by illegal immigrants. That's it for this week's episode of Parsing Immigration Policy. This is Mark Krikorian, thanking our guest, Balazs Orban, as well as our producer, Brian Griffith, who makes this whole thing work. Please remember to rate and review this podcast if your podcast platform allows for that. And regardless of that, if you have any suggestions, complaints, criticisms, compliments even, feel free to email us at center@cis.org. Hope to hear from you next week.